New Deep Dive.
And today, we're going to talk about an event that shook New York City in July of 2025, a devastating flash flood that turned the streets of the Big Apple into raging rivers. This isn't just a story about heavy rain. It's about climate change, crumbling infrastructure, and the people who had to face the chaos head-on. Why is New York, a city of skyscrapers and subways, so vulnerable to floods? How did residents cope with the disruption? And what does this disaster tell us about the future? Get ready for a story full of drama, data, and deep reflection. Let's dive in. July 2025. New York City, the city that never sleeps, woke up in the middle of a nightmare. On Monday and Tuesday, the 14th and 15th of July, torrential rains swept through the city and neighboring New Jersey. These weren't just heavy showers, it was a wall of water. In Central Park, more than 50 liters of rain per square meter fell in just 1 hour. That's right, 50 liters per square meter. It was the second highest hourly rainfall ever recorded in the city. In parts of New Jersey, like Union County, over 15 centimeters of rain fell in just a few hours. To put that in perspective, that's as much rain as Poland sometimes sees in an entire month. These rains triggered what's known as a flash flood, a sudden and intense flood that can develop within hours or even minutes, especially in urban areas where water has nowhere to escape. The streets of New York turned into torrents, and subway stations became indoor lakes. Water surged into subway cars, flooded platforms, and at the 28th Street station in Manhattan, a geyser erupted from the sewer system. Imagine the scene. People in suits and sneakers wading knee-deep through murky water trying to get to work. Not the image you typically associate with New York City, right? Tragically, the flood also brought loss of life. In Plainfield, New Jersey, 2 people died when their car was swept away by floodwaters. Thankfully, no fatalities were reported in New York itself, but firefighters and rescue teams were stretched to their limits. They pulled people from submerged cars, flooded basements, and even ground-floor apartments. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy declared a state of emergency, and New York City Mayor Eric Adams urged residents to stay safe. The sewer system can't keep up, Adams said, and he was right. The city's infrastructure, built to handle a maximum of 5 centimeters of rainfall per hour, didn't stand a chance. Before we dig into the causes and consequences of this flood, let's rewind a bit. Was July of 2025 the first time New York struggled with major flooding? Absolutely not. The city has a long history of battling floods, each leaving its mark on the collective memory. Take Hurricane Ida in 2021. That was a catastrophe. The storm's remnants brought record-setting rains that drenched New York and New Jersey. In just 1 hour, over 12 centimeters of rain fell in Central Park, a record that was nearly matched 4 years later. Ida claimed at least 13 lives in New York City alone, and over 40 across the region. Water inundated basements, highways, and even high-rise apartments. The city declared its first-ever flash flood emergency. Then, in September of 2023, New York was hit again. Brooklyn saw 15 centimeters of rainfall in just a few hours. Subway service halted. LaGuardia Airport partially shut down. Governor Kathy Hochul declared another state of emergency. Residents described the rain as biblical, and images of waterlogged streets flooded social media worldwide. Why revisit these events? Because they reveal a pattern. New York is especially prone to flooding for several reasons. First, geography. The city sits on the coast and has over 800 kilometers of shoreline, making it vulnerable to surges and sea level rise. Second, urbanization. Areas that once absorbed water are now paved over with concrete and asphalt. The water has nowhere to go but up through basements and down into subways. Third, outdated infrastructure. New York's sewer system, although vast, was designed in an era when climate change wasn't even a concept. It simply can't keep up. But why are these floods becoming more frequent and more severe? The answer: climate change. I know it's a term we hear all the time, but in this case, it has a very real meaning. Scientists, including climatologists at Columbia University, explain that global warming increases the amount of water vapor the atmosphere can hold. Warmer air holds more moisture, which leads to more intense rainfall. In July of 2025, the storms over New York resembled tropical downpours, something you'd expect in the Caribbean, not on Manhattan. The National Weather Service issued over 100 flash flood warnings that day, the most ever recorded in a single July day in the region. And climate change isn't just about more rain. It also means higher temperatures, which accelerate evaporation and increase condensation, a feedback loop that leads to more violent storms. What's more, New York sits in a region where the effects of climate change are being felt faster than in many other parts of the world. The sea level around the city is rising by about 2.5 centimeters per decade, making it increasingly vulnerable to floods not just during storms, but even during high tides. What does this mean for residents? Flash floods like the one in 2025 are especially dangerous because they come without warning. You don't have time to pack, move furniture upstairs, or evacuate. The water crashes into homes within minutes. In a city where thousands live in basement apartments, many of them rented illegally, the risks are enormous. After Ida in 2021, city leaders promised improvements. But as 2025 showed, the danger hasn't gone away. Now let's talk about the people, because they are at the heart of this story. How did New Yorkers deal with the flood? Social media platforms like X were flooded, pun intended, with photos and videos. People wading waist-deep in water, drivers stranded in their cars, subway workers trying to plug leaks in tunnels. One resident, Zoe Wasserloff-Pepper, described how brown water poured into her New Jersey home. It looked like a scene out of a post-apocalyptic movie, she said. She had to replace the roof and throw out nearly everything from her basement. City authorities acted quickly, but not always effectively. Mayor Adams urged people to stay indoors. The Office of Emergency Management handed out flashlights and advised residents to charge their phones, anticipating power outages. Firefighters conducted dozens of rescue operations, and the National Weather Service issued nonstop warnings. Governor Murphy told New Jersey residents, "Stay home and stay safe." But for many people, staying home wasn't an option. Not everyone can afford to take a day off work. The flood also sparked debate about inequality. The hardest-hit areas were often the poorest places where people live in basement, apartments, or low-lying neighborhoods. Wealthier parts of Manhattan, while affected, bounced back faster. It's a stark reminder that climate change doesn't impact everyone equally. So what now? Is New York doomed to face more floods? Unfortunately, the evidence suggests so, but the city isn't standing still. After Hurricane Ida, investments in flood protection began, estimated at $46 billion. It's a staggering figure, but essential if the city wants to withstand what used to be once-in-a-century floods that now happen every few years. The city is working with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to update flood risk maps known as FIRMs, which help guide planning and insurance. But the problem is that the existing infrastructure, sewers, levees, dams, is outdated. In some neighborhoods, the sewer system dates back to the 19th century. There are plans for modernization, but that process could take decades. Meanwhile, residents are organizing. Online groups are sharing tips on how to prepare for floods, from sandbag placement to securing flood insurance. But there's also growing frustration. Many New Yorkers are asking, how can a city that spends billions on skyscrapers still not fix its sewers? The flood in New York City in July of 2025 isn't just a story about water on the streets. It's a story about a city grappling with its past, its infrastructure, and a changing climate. It's also a story about people, from first responders pulling drivers from their cars to residents cleaning out waterlogged homes. It shows just how fragile everyday life is in the face of nature's force.